You're listening to Creative Campfire, where creatives like you come to talk shop, share stories, and light the path for one another. Whether you're here to learn, grow, or feel a little less alone, welcome to the fire. I'm really excited to have this super uber talented artist, author, speaker, probably many more things that I don't even know that we can add to that list on the show today because of a really great friend, Jesse Sierra Ross, who's a wonderful photographer friend of mine, introduced me to who we're going to talk to today. And it's been like a little Pandora box. Like when I opened his website, there is so much to dive into and so much to unpack. It's just a never-ending treasure trove in so many ways. So, Mike, I'm so glad that you're here today so we can open that box and let more people into your world.
Oh, thank you, Shelley. I'm loving that we're here, and I'm glad to connect with you.
And it's really fun now to be on the flip side because you just interviewed me on your podcast. And so now I get to interview you over here, which is really fun. So the table has turned. So, Mike, for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do today, because there's a lot of things that you've done in between when you started and now. And we'll dive into that in a minute.
Yes. So really, when it comes down to it, I am a creator and communicator. And I say this I have this soundbite that says, I'm a creator and communicator who tells stories on pages and stages. And then people are like, cool, intriguing. But what does that mean? So then I break it down for people. And I'm like, well, on the creator side, visual art is my background. That's what I do. I do a lot of digital paintings and mixed media paintings. Graphic design is what I went to art school for, continue to do that. So logos, marketing materials, all that, branding. And then really create whatever it is that I'm experiencing out of that. And so sometimes it's books, sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's who knows? Because it's my way of interpreting what I'm experiencing and going, if I'm experiencing this and there's something to be some purpose or meaning or some perspective that can emerge, I think it's beneficial for other people as well. And that's kind of proven to me a way to connect with people. And so then on the communicator side, it is speaking, like you said. I talk about creativity and specifically about how to create more consistently, because I find that as creative people, we dip in and out of our creativity. We may go long seasons where we don't do anything and then come back to it and do like a whole day or a whole weekend, and we're all excited, and then it goes away again. So how do we show up consistently for our creativity so that we're actually hitting some goals that we have of bigger projects we want to do and see come to life? So I talk about that. I talk about fun and trying to recapture some of the joy and honestly just enjoyment that we had when we were kids, when we didn't think so hard about things and things weren't so heavy and practical and responsible. Some things that would actually do us well to introduce back into our lives and our work. And then also there's a crossroads of mental health. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, but my journey has been one that has been linked with that and just trying to navigate some of the darker spaces as a creative person and just a person, honestly. And how does my creativity intersect with that? And what does that look like? And helping other people access that as well. So again, that all comes in forms of speaking. It comes in the forms of my podcast. It comes in the form of writing, really any way that I can connect with people to help them. Sometimes it's even coaching, creative coaching, and setting up a community so that like-minded people can come together and say, you know what, I'm not alone in this. Any resource that I can create for fellow creatives, I'm there because I know what it's like. I'm living in those trenches as well.
So speaking of trenches,
yes.
Right. And the highs and lows of kind of the creative arts and the mental wellness piece, the enjoyment piece. There was a time that you had mentioned to me where you weren't creating and you were trying to navigate back to that enjoyment, as you said, right? Navigate back to how to actually have a practice And it wasn't something you always had. So I would love for you to give us that perspective, because when you mention like, oh, you're all jazzed about something and you go and you like shoot that project over whatever, maybe 2 days, or you set it up over the weekend and you do it. I'm like, were you just in my house, like watching me just shoot this thing for, like I was doing like a spec shoot for a brand and I was all jazzed about it. And I set it up and I shot like 2 hours over 3 days. And now the images are just sitting waiting to be edited. And that was like a week ago. So it's like you were here. It's like you knew that that's what just happened.
Yes. Well, I remember as a kid going like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life, right? I was creating greeting cards for family members and they're seeing their faces light up and they're like, you made this for me? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And it was like cartoon characters and things from my world, but they appreciated it. And so fast forward a little bit, I realized that there was this exchange that was happening where I could create something, give it to somebody else, see their face light up and impact their world, even if it was just a smile. And I thought, that's a cool thing to be able to do. And I want to do that the rest of my life. And so went to art school, graphic design on that track, worked at various different places, large New York City ad agencies like, Heineken and Chase Bank and all these corporate clients. And then I went to other places where I was the art department, real scrappy and small. And so I had every experience in between, packaging design, layout design, magazine, you name it, I kind of was in there. And eventually I got to this point where I was at a magazine company and we had a deadline every 2 weeks and the churn rate was very high. And I enjoyed what I was doing, but then it started to feel like I was part of a machine where you're just constantly pumping out work. And I started to feel kind of burned out and thought to myself, is this it? Like, I don't know. Something feels off and there's a disconnect. And there was another part of me, honestly, that was very much wired relationally. I wanted to connect. And I didn't know at the time, but it's really important for me. And I figured this out after digging through my own journey. But for me to create something, it doesn't feel complete unless I'm connecting with somebody around what I've created. And so for design, I'm creating these things, I'm creating these layouts and cool designs, and then it gets shipped out and I never get to see the end user interact with what I've created. So there was a missing piece there too. So anyway, those elements kind of conspired for me to actually just go, I'm leaving design altogether. And I went into a completely different field and for about 10 years and didn't do anything creatively. I put it on a shelf. And a lot of that had to do with just me trying to step into roles where they weren't really aligned. And it was kind of outside my gifting, but it was sort of like, well, somebody has to do this. A lot of practicality, a lot of responsibility and weight of things. And I even personally didn't do any creative projects because at that point in my life, it was like young family with kids and just a lot of other demands. And it was just, I just thought, well, that was a season there and I've kind of closed the door on that. But I really underestimated how much I needed that for me and how much I actually lost myself in that process of going, this is going to go away. I don't have time for this, whatever excuses I wanted to throw at it. And so eventually 10 years into it, I found myself suffering from depression and didn't even realize it because it was like a high functioning depression, right? I was still showing up, working, serving other people, doing all the things. In my mind, depression was you're on the couch. You can't move. You can't get up out of bed. You're just
crying every day.
Debilitated. Yeah, right. And that was not my experience. So I thought, well, I'm not depressed. Like, what are you talking about? Right? Somebody came to me, a friend said, you're not yourself. You're depressed. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But the more I sat with that, it was like a splinter in my mind. And I was like, I can't stop thinking about this. And I think that person's right. And what do I do about that? And part of that was me going, I've been denying who I really am as a creator. I've been trying to do all these other roles and listen to a lot of other people's expectations of me in my life, but I was really denying who I was. And so it just all fell apart. And that season ushered in me having to leave that job and that career. I was kind of chewed up and spit out of that. And then I felt like I couldn't go back to design because it had been 10 years and technology and everything else kind of passes you by. And then it was also like having to move, having to sell our house, like just complete life upheaval. And then the final straw was that my dad was diagnosed with cancer and passed very quickly. And so I'm sitting there kind of going like, how did life become this?
It sounds like you got
Like,
hit by a lot of consecutive waves of things,
yes.
right? Like you got burnt out at the first job. You took a job that was kind of way outside your comfort zone and you kind of became a cog in that machine. And you were like, family and life and things get moving and moving and moving. And then all of a sudden that final wave is kind of like, you're at your dad's funeral or just afterwards, where you're kind of just coming back to the surface for like that additional breath before maybe you're smacked again in the face.
Yeah. And it was just going like, I feel like I am sitting in a pile of ash and I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know if I can get out of this. And trying to figure out what this forward looked like, because I know I can't stay here and I can't go back, but what can forward even look like? And it was really in the midst of that and trying to get some health and some perspective and therapy and just make some sense out of things that I felt this internal call to go, what if you came back to your creativity, not for a career, but just for you? Like, remember that kid who made those greeting cards. Remember the joy. Remember the purity of that. Can you get back to that? And I sat with that question and I was like, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. But I also knew that I couldn't stay where I was. So I said, at this point, what else do I have to lose? I mean, we're at rock bottom. So my entry point back into my creativity after a 10-year hiatus was me just asking that question of, I need this for myself. Can I do this? And what would this look like? And so it was day one where I took this sketchbook, blew the dust off of it, took some pens out and went to a local Starbucks and drew this Starbucks coffee cup. And I looked at it and I was like, this is awful. This is like, if anybody, seriously, I was like, if anybody looked at this over my shoulder and they're like, you went to art school, dude? Like, what happened? Ooh, this is bad. Like, it just was embarrassing, honestly. And I remember sitting with it for a minute and going like, this is a defining moment. I can either write day one at the top of the page, or I could let this be the only day and not continue because I feel ashamed and I feel like I don't have the capacity that I once had. And I feel like this is not the results that I wanted.
Yeah. It's like a shadow of yourself.
Yeah. And so I decided this is about a much bigger journey than just one drawing. And I wrote day one at the top of the sketchbook. And I said, I'm going to come back for day two tomorrow and see what happens then. And so it sent me on this journey that I had been introduced to, which was a 365-day art making journey. And when I first heard about it, it scared me to death. And I thought, I don't think I can do this. Like an entire year where I show up every single day and create something. I'm like, I haven't done anything in the past 10 years. How can I show up for a year? And I just said, again, what do I have to lose? I'm making up rules as I go along, and I'm giving myself little parameters and projects, and I'm letting myself play. I'm letting myself explore. I'm letting myself just go. I'm holding loosely to this. And if it, quote, fails, well, then it fails. But at least I tried something. And so my approach was really like, okay, what if I do 14 days of like flowers? And then I would do that and I would have something else lined up after that and say, okay, well, let me do 30 days of pets. And I was trying different mediums. I was trying different subject matters. I was just trying different, whatever I could, and stringing together small projects so that I could make it to the end of a year, honestly. And fast forward, made it to the end of the year, was like, this is okay, pretty amazing that I actually did this. I did a lot of bad work, but there were a couple of moments in there where I was like, you know what? I feel like this was okay. Like, I feel like something's coming back here. So then I said, well, I made it to the year. Now what? And I was like, I don't think I'm done. I think I need to keep going. So I kept going. And the more that I leaned into it, the more things started to emerge. I started to eventually find really my voice and my style. Even though I had gone to art school, like I said, and again, it was for graphic design, so this was different. This was more like illustrations and paintings and things. But I started to discover and rediscover myself in the process. And through that, gain some more confidence, gain some clarity, gain some insights. And so I kept going past 2 years, past 3 years, past 4 years, and so on. And then I started to realize there's a process at work here that's been happening intuitively. What if I identified what that was so that I could actually do it on purpose? And then also, I think this is for other creatives, not even just other visual artists, but I think other creative people. I think I need to really put this in a package so that it's helpful for other people who may be where I am or was. And that's where Daily Creative Habit came from, which is basically 4 parts to this process. It's not like a linear thing, but it's 4 elements that were part of this journey, continue to be part of my journey as a creative person. That it's, starting small, it's scheduling it, it's playing, and it's celebrating your wins. And those 4 things are a part of my creative practice. And it helps me stay on track. It helps me have some kind of guardrails so that it's not just like, well, I'm going to sit down and create something today, but I don't really know, is it going to lead to something? Is there going to be any sense of progress? Is there going to be any sense of completion? Or I don't know. And sometimes we do things and we know that we've done things, but we don't really have a sense of, it just kind of feels too slippery. And so getting some metrics, right? Tracking and measuring what we're doing. And as sometimes gross as that feels for me, the heart-centered part of me, that's more like, I want to just create because I'm in love with the art. It's also important to know like what's happening and looking at those metrics of like, am I showing up every day to do this? And what does it look like? And where is it going? And some of the other things that if we don't ask those questions, we won't know those answers and we can't do some things with intention and purpose then. So this has all been linked with my own journey of coming out of this time of depression and dealing with mental health and making sure that I'm not going back to a place where I'm denying who I really am and losing myself again because of either internal voices or external voices.
Ooh. Okay, I think everybody just needs to like take a deep breath because that was a lot. But things that I want to touch on and re-amplify is one, recognizing that there was something bigger at play there and you just intuitively went with it. And it wasn't until years, like years with a big S on the end, that you were like, oh, there's a method here. Like, what is that method? Then the recognition there to then actually pay attention to what's working for you and being aware enough to then write it down, right? Realize that there was a process at work here that you didn't even know was at work, which I totally love because I think a lot of us, a lot of creatives that I know, you're so on the creative side and the analytical really doesn't play in to your narrow pathways. Like it just isn't there. And so I sit right in the middle of analytical and creative. Like I can geek out on that data. I love looking at data. So when you were like, oh, and you want to look at the data, right? Because the data has its own story and the data kind of can help us navigate the road a little bit faster or maybe slightly easier or help us maybe to avoid a few of the pitfalls. But if you're someone who doesn't look at that, right, then having the steps to go through to help you realize that there is a methodology, that there is information that's there that maybe you're just not accessing is so helpful. I mean, I think most people that I know now, maybe it's because I'm of a certain age, but when have hit us, kind of that depression or that the muckiness or the fog and have fallen down a bit, I've always said like, oh, I turned to the artist way to kind of like help me get through it. And I've done the artist way many, many years ago. And I definitely picked and chose what I did in the artist way. I didn't do the whole book, but I love this idea of 4-part play. It's more like containers instead of like actual, like, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do in each of those containers.
Yes.
Because like you said, as a creative, you might see the world in a different way. You might play in those boxes differently than you do or I do. And someone who is a visual artist versus someone who's a musician is going to do things vastly different.
Yes, exactly.
So I love that this is kind of a new version on something that a lot of people know already. And I love that it's a daily practice kind of based on either, you know, some people try to do like the 100-day project, or some people just do the 365.
And that was part
project.
of mine. Yeah. Yeah.
But I also love this idea of giving yourself themes or a subject matter. And because to me, the idea of a 365 project literally scares the pants off of me. I'm like, that feels like a big commitment. That feels like a bigger commitment than when I said yes to my husband, right? Like that, it feels like this commitment that I'm making to myself, and that I have to show up every day. And I'm like, what would I shoot for 365 days? Or what would I create for 365 days? So give us a little bit about how that learning and those mini projects have helped you figure out like the type of art you like today, right? Because now we're years down the line from that initial project.
Yeah. 13 years in, I'm still doing this. Yeah.
So I'd love to know like how and what did you discover through this practice for your own art? I mean, I'm sitting here looking at you. Folks can't see this, so I'm going to describe it. Mike's sitting in front of me. He has these killer teal glasses on right now. And right behind him is, I can see 4 of his digital art. And I think they're like gas. Aren't they like gas?
Those, yeah, those are,
yeah.
Those actually aren't digital. Those are mixed media pieces that have to do with clean water initiatives. And so that's what they do, you know, is they actually would carry water in these jerry cans that would usually carry gas. Yes. And so it's kind of symbolic. Yeah.
And then right behind him, you have some great digital. Well, you told me before that they're digital art, but it looks, I'm totally convinced that it's not. I actually for them, and he's just putting me on. But they're very cool portraits of, well, Iron Man for those that.
Yes, Robert Downey Jr. and then Jeff Goldblum. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're very cool and they're very colorful. They're kind of like a patchworked of block colors with some really great like identifying like pen strokes in there. So it's very, very, very colorful, very cool. But I'm guessing when you started back, even 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 13 years ago, your creative eye and your creative style is probably morphed over time, I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah. It was understanding what was more intuitive for me and embracing that. Because when I was in art school, like what was championed, and again, I went for design, so I had other classes that weren't necessarily within the goal of what I was doing, so to speak. But I would take drawing classes and such. And the goal was always for those, do photorealism. You need to render this so that it looks realistic. And while I could do that somewhat, I always found that a very frustrating process. And I thought to myself, well, because I'm not any good at that, I'm not a quote real artist. Like that was what was celebrated. And in my mind, I knew that there were artists that did other styles and different things. But for that lie kind of got lodged within me. And I had to unpack that through making my own art my own way. And also realizing like, I like splatter marks. I like loose lines. I like bold colors. And instead of resisting that and thinking, well, because my art doesn't look like that art, it's not good or I'm not a real artist, dive deeper into what seems to resonate with me. Do more splatters, do bigger colors that are bolder, big, more lines that are loose, and allowing myself the place to play and the freedom to just keep doing things. And also the pace of doing something every single day gives you this sense of not holding things too precious, because you know that you're going to show up tomorrow and do something new tomorrow. So if today bombs, it's not like I've invested all these months and years on one thing and then mounted this pressure behind it where it's like it has to be a masterpiece. And if it's not a masterpiece, then it's going to fail. And so having that rhythm of show up every day and do something, it gives you the ability to be more nimble with that and go like, okay, yeah, that one was bad, but it was part of a process and a journey. Maybe I learned something. Maybe there was something that was a bridge project, right? Like that wasn't the thing that I really needed to land on, but it taught me oh, this technique or this particular subject matter or whatever I found in this one piece that I'm not going to keep, but it introduced me to another door to walk through. And so it was this always kind of forward leaning, championing curiosity, championing play. And in terms of like even the projects that you mentioned, I realized later on, I'm like, that actually came out of design, because it was, like every 2 weeks I had the deadline, or every, whatever the creative brief that I would get and the project timeline, it was a definitive thing. It wasn't this open-ended, like, just do this until you're done, so that actually helped serve me in this capacity, because I was like, well, if I give myself 14 days to do flowers, and I'm like, by like day 10, I'm like, oh Lord, like, what did I do? I hate this. I know that there's an out. And also, if I find, alternatively, if I like something, I can say, well, I'm going to renew this for another 14 days and see what else happens. Again, I'm making the rules here. And I realized, like, this is more about your personal creative practice, right? Because it's not like I was doing this for clients and commissions and the rest of that stuff. Some of that stuff came out of what I ended up doing for myself personally. But I needed that place to figure this out and to give some context and shape. And also have a place to express and to process. That really was what it came down to, was me processing through what I was making.
When you do this practice, even let's say today or in the last year, are you journaling alongside? Like, do you write down your thoughts as well? Is that part of the process or part of the creative process? Like this mini stretch, whatever, this week long or 14 day, like, this is about writing versus actual, like, always, drawing or painting.
Yes. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I have 8 books that I've self-published, and most of them are illustrated books. And there was one in particular that's not, that's written word. And I wasn't planning on doing that, but I found that somewhere along the way I rediscovered my love for writing as well, and thought to myself, well, why limit my daily creative practice to just my visual art? It's about being creative, and that can take many forms. And so that certainly was reintroduced to me, I'd say, the past few years. And journaling has been something I've been doing since I was 18. And I won't tell you how old I am now, but it's been a long time. There's a lot of journals.
Well, we know you're at least, 18, and we know you've been doing this practice for 13 years. So you're only like, what, 31?
Sure. Yeah. Sounds great. But I do process differently through written word than I do with visual art. And so for me, it's not a either or, it's a yes and.
Yeah, it's like improv.
Exactly.
So I love that it's like you mentioned behind you, right, is mixed media. And that is literally your practice, is mixed media. So no matter if it's written word or you're painting, drawing, whether that's physically or collaging or doing it all on your iPad, it's part of the habit, which reminds me of David Hockney. He had an everyday, practice of creating, and I got to go to his digital show that he had here, and the amount of work that man has produced in his lifetime is just staggering. And so I just think about the amount of work that you have created just within these 13 years, not even accounting for your previous, work in design,
right?
Like, must be staggering. Like, there must be this immense amount of work.
Well, and part of that practice has been documenting that. So, like, if you go to my Instagram, Mike Bone, I have pinned the 13 years, what that looks like. It's a mosaic of all the little pieces. And so it's like, you can't even really see what they are, but I know what they are. And so at the end of every year, what I do is I make a mosaic of what that year's work was. And then I add that to the previous years. So I have these 2 images. One that goes, this is what you just did this last year, and one that goes, this is what you've been doing over 13 years. And I can look at that and see things that go, oh, that's where I was phoning it in and got lazy. Oh, that's where I was trying something and it failed. That's where I had a breakthrough. That's where I started to explore something and it was taking root because I was putting in my reps. I can look at things that go, that reminds me of a certain person because I created some art around some experiences that I had and the people that I love and that are close to me. Or that was something that I was struggling with and this is how it came out in this piece of art. Like it's all there for me to see. And when you do something like that, it does a couple things. One, it shows that you can do this, like it's possible. And then the other thing it does is because going back to your kind of data and metrics, right? It gives you something visually to look at that shows you your journey, you know, and for my case, it's visual, right?
Yeah, right.
But a way to say, I showed up, I did it, this is what it looked like, this is what I experienced. It gives you reference point that you can look back to that can help you as you move forward.
Yeah. And I love like the history piece, right? Where you get to look at it and you're like finding those nuggets of like the breakthroughs, the advancement, maybe in technique, or where you finally like, you're like, oh, I finally figured that thing out.
Right.
And whether that's in writing or music or painting, like I think that also is where it gets back to one of your like key pillars, which is enjoyment and joy. And you get to look back at all of this great work you did, and there's this sense of accomplishment, this sense of like, look at all this stuff that I made.
Yeah.
And there's a real like pleasure in that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the flip side of joy and pleasure, which is the darker side, right? That depression side. Besides doing this practice and then realizing like this is helping you reconnect with the childhood enjoyment of art, the mental health piece of all of this, that's kind of what we've been circling around this whole time, is really super important. I think one, as creatives, and especially if you're a freelancer, you go through this crazy roller coaster of emotion. And as the world gets full of things that feel like it might be threatening your livelihood, then, you know, it's really wearing. And so I would love for you to talk about kind of the mental health side of things. I know you speak on this, and then I know that there's a fun new published book by you that folks may not even know about because it just came out like this year, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. So Blue, A Story of Letting Go. I'd love for us to kind of dig into this side of the conversation because I don't think it's talked about enough. And I do think that there are silent sufferers out there, and let's give them a voice.
Yes. And I'm glad that you said that, you know, silent sufferers, because I think too often that's the experience, because there's so much shame, I think, associated with feeling these feelings of depression, of feeling like you're stuck and spiraling and you're having ruminating thoughts and you feel somewhat of a prisoner inside of yourself. And how do you navigate that space? How do you show up and do the things you need to do? And also, like, when you're a creative person, you're relying on your creativity for your livelihood. It is extremely difficult to be wrestling with your mental health, which affects your creativity. So it's like, essentially, you can't just show up at a job and push buttons and fake your way through and still get paid and nobody knows anything different. This is actually making me not have ideas or not have the motivation to be able to pick myself up and actually show up and do the work that I need to do, or interact with people how I need to interact with them, and finding new clients and things where your energy, people pick up on those things. And so it really does affect your whole existence. And so I'm a big believer in therapy. I think everybody should be in therapy, honestly. That wasn't always the case. I didn't always think that. But I think the more that you can have a place to process and work through some things and have some outside help with that, the better. And then also to do the work yourself, to say, first off, how can you become more self-aware? And what are the tools that you can use? We talk about journaling. I mean, that's huge for me because it allows me to just kind of brain dump some things and to also get out a lot of my emotion and put it on a page and then step back from it and look at it. And then also to look at what's happened over the past month. If I look back, am I seeing patterns? Am I seeing things happening here, giving me a way to process? And so for creativity also, sometimes I'm working on a piece because I'm trying to process. And my way of processing is doing this painting. And maybe it has a certain subject matter, or maybe it has just the tactile experience that I need to be creative to help me express. There are times when I've created things that they were very specific to my circumstance and some mental health issues that I was battling. But when I made those things and actually brought them out into public, they resonated with other people and they found some redemption. And that was the bigger thing for me when I realized, oh, I can be a part of that story. Like I can be a part of offering hope and saying like, you don't need to let this be something that is a prison in solitude. This can be something where if you let it be a healing pathway, if you let it be something that has some redemption to it for yourself first, and then you bring it to other people. I mean, nobody wants to go through the dark stuff, but if we have to go through it, why not find some redeeming qualities in there, something to take from the journey that actually is helpful and hopeful. So that's been more of my outlook as I continue to navigate some of these spaces. And it's not like, I had this bout with depression, back then, and that's it. And that never comes back. It's gone. Right. Because life happens, right? Things happen outside your control, and there are things that trigger you sometimes. And there are things that just struggles, the world keeps changing around us too. And so trying to figure out, how do I show up for myself? How do I show up in the world around me? How do I navigate my internal landscape when it feels like it's just upside down and on fire? Also, like processing, creating things, making meaning, finding purpose, finding that hope and that redemption. I think those are bigger calls than spiraling down and down and down and down, and it becoming so dark that you just feel like there's no way out whatsoever. Now, I do think, we do need to sit with what we're feeling and process that, our emotions. We can't run from, and we can't try to just have this toxic positivity. But through your processing, through your sitting with, pay attention and make things. And if you have to make some dark things first, make some dark things first. And then look for areas where there might be even the sliver of hope. Look for things that you're learning about yourself and about all this, first and foremost, again, for yourself. And then maybe there's a point at which you can share that with somebody else. And again, it becomes maybe a map or an anchor, a hope, something for somebody else.
Yeah, I think there's a graphic I saw recently, and it was from like top down, it just looks like a spiral, right? Mm-hmm. So the whole idea of like, you're just spiraling. But if you turn it and you look straight onto it, it's actually a funnel that you're evolving. Mm. And sometimes, to your point of therapy or talking about it, or even just self-journaling about it, may give you a different perspective to what's going on. Maybe a different tool for you to put in your toolkit, so you have a different way to approach it or address it. And I mean, everybody deals with this stuff very differently and processes differently. My husband and I process very differently. Like his grandfather died, and I immediately was like, well, you're going to the funeral, right? You got to be there for your mom and your grandmother and blah, blah, blah. And like, cause that's what I would do. Cause that's what I need. And he's like, no, I'm not going to go. And I'm like, what? Like, why would you not go? And I mean, now we've been together for 25 years, and that happened within the first couple of years we were together. And now I understand how that's just something he just deals with internally. And he when he wants to talk about it, like he'll let me know and I'm the person he talks to about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, oh, is it okay for me to tell so-and-so that, your grandfather died? And he's like, yeah, but I don't want to talk to them. If they want to talk, they can talk to you about it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And where I'm like, oh, my grandmother died and it was so painful and I want to be there for my family and I want to physically do all of these things because that's how I process.
Right. Yeah.
And for most things, I think it's also about like, you had mentioned something about, all the internal stuff, like when you rely on your creativity and things start to dim inside, that creativity somewhat dims, and sometimes you can't perform at the level that you're used to performing.
Yes.
And it made me think also, like, if you're someone who people know as a certain personality, like whether you're bubbly and outgoing and maybe a verbal processor, so you talk a lot, versus when you show up and that light has been dimmed, you might be more quiet and introspective and maybe more of a mystique personality that people are not used to. And so they are immediately like, Shelley, what's wrong with you? Like,
right.
You're not acting how we normally expect you to act. Like,
yeah.
You're not the people's champion right now.
Yeah.
And so to kind of, if there's a way to step back and look at those things of like, oh, has my behavior changed? Because that might be a signal, like you were saying, you were a high functioning person, but you were actually really depressed.
Yeah.
And I do see, I see that conversation come up more and more in different circles that I'm in about like, yeah, I'm suffering from these things, even though on the outside, like I look like I'm, Mighty Mouse. I look like I'm amazing and I'm still doing all this stuff. And I'm still like, mom and head of carpool and, going to jujitsu and doing all these different things, but I'm literally just going through the motions of it all.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, realizing like processing can take a long time, and it doesn't necessarily mean just sitting down and journaling something in a session and then you're like, okay, good, move on. And so in terms of my work, even the creative stuff, the things that come out of my experiences, it sometimes is, I need to let this sit for a while because this is too fresh. And I've made a promise to myself that I don't want to bleed on anybody publicly, right? I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not going to talk about unprocessed pain and bring that out and cause more harm than good. There are some things that just still stay private, and that's fine and right. But there are other times when it's like, okay, I'm going to make art of this. And I think that's the art that speaks to us and others, right? We think of like love songs, breakup songs, right? Some of the most heartbreaking lyrics that we've sung along to. The reason why we resonate with that is because we're like, they're tapping into something that I'm feeling. I feel very seen and heard in this. And they've had a painful experience that I've gone through. And that makes me feel close to the creator as well as the art. And there's something to be said for that, because that person had a very real situation that they were going through when they made that thing. And now it's transcended to your situation. And then somebody else who is interacting with it, it goes to them. And so it kind of spreads and has a life of its own after it leaves the creator. And so participating in that too, I think, is pretty huge and hopeful for me. And again, it's a piece of that redemption that I was talking about before. And so you mentioned my book, the latest book, Blue, A Story of Letting Go. That is the case there. So the backstory on that is that like 3.5 years ago, I went through this very painful situation where there was this relationship, and it was a lot of heartbreak. It was somebody that I really loved, and suddenly they were gone. And there were circumstances that happened, and I was trying to process my way through, going like, I don't know how to make sense of this. And so the way that I made sense of it at that time was that I took to my phone and I wrote in the notes section this fable about this boy who is friends with a caterpillar, and this friendship that evolves, and then eventually the caterpillar disappears and the boy is distraught. And I won't ruin the whole story, but it's about him trying to deal with loss and letting go and not understanding what's happened and not having closure and all these things that we can sometimes experience and feel, and dealing with big emotions, and not knowing what to do with them. And so that all kind of went into this fable, and it sat there in my phone for 3.5 years. And I thought, this is just for me. This was for me to process this pain, this painful relationship and transition, and trying to let go and learn the lessons and do all the things. And then earlier this year, I had this internal prompting of, I think it's time to revisit that. Enough time has gone by, enough healing has happened. What if you took that and made that into something so that it could help other people? And so, sitting with that idea for a minute, I thought, okay, I guess this is my next book. I wasn't planning on doing this, but this is what emerged. And so I took to illustrating this and then adding some other things around the story. And there's even a special edition hardback where I have some journal prompts in the back, so that if someone's dealing with loss, if someone is dealing with having to let go, whether that's a relationship, whether it's the death of a dream, whether that's whatever it is that someone has been clinging to and saying, this is what it needs to look like, this is how it needs to look, this is who it needs to be with, this is, and clinging to that, and suddenly realizing that it's gone. And what do you do in the aftermath of that? And how do you find yourself? How do you find freedom? How do you work through those emotions? That's what this book is really about. And so it was a departure for me, in that my other books really were more about my art and the experience and about fun and creativity. And this is really more, I think, something that even if someone who says, they're not a creative person, which, by the way, I think we're all creative, but even if they thought, well, those other books are not for me, like that's not the category I fall into. I think everyone has experienced something of pain, loss, having to let go, dealing with change, and this transformation that happens in the journey as we try to engage with that.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's big emotions, right? And it's really hard to process, especially when you didn't see this coming, when it's like a tragic thing and you're not aware of it. Or like you mentioned, death of a dream, which I've been pondering since you said that, right? Where you have this idea of something you want to go after, or the big audacious goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you are headed that direction, and then you realize like that might not be the thing. And I've been there. I know several other people who've been there, and you're like, letting go of that idea can be just as painful as, like, getting T-boned in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes you have to realize, like for me, I had to realize like that wasn't the end all be all. That was just
right.
Like I turned into a cul-de-sac. The road didn't continue anymore, and I had to pick a new direction. And that big audacious goal wasn't what I wanted anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something else, or I wanted a different version of it. And so, but that was hard. Like, it's really hard to be like, but you've been chasing that for this amount of time, right? Fill in the blank. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I don't know how to run after something else. I've been chasing that carrot this whole time. And now you change the carrot to a banana. I don't want the banana. I want the carrot.
Yes. Yeah. And so often we find our identity wrapped up in all that too, which can be troublesome. Because if we've wrapped our identity in something and that something goes away, then where does that leave us? Who are we? What are we supposed to do? And it can be devastating on a whole different level.
Yeah. I have gone through 2 of those exact things this year.
Mm-hmm.
So like one of my cats tragically passed. And one of my things is like, I'm known, I love cats. I have 2 cats. I always introduce myself as my cats. Oh, you could check my cats out on Instagram. And then when he passed away just a month ago, someone was like, oh, how are your cats? And I was like, well, one's gone. The other one has
Yeah.
stage 4 kidney disease. She won't be around very much longer. But, and it's like, oh, I realize like that is part of my identity. That's how I talk about myself. That's part of my story. It's really like hard to be like, well, when they are gone, now what do I say? I mean, I still love cats. I'll still always love cats, but right. I mean, and this is just a really simple example of the same idea of like, how do you identify, and the things that you talk about and the things that really are close to who you are. And when people usually say like, oh, tell me about you, or people say, do you have kids? And I say, no, I don't have kids, I have cats. So I do think that identity piece that gets baked into a lot of the things is really hard. And especially in the world we live in today, where people change jobs and change industries. And you probably have witnessed this, knowing, you've changed industries over time, and you've changed the different things that you're doing and the different stages that you're on. And I don't know if you get people who come up to you and they're like, Mike, like, how did you go from like working in a big commercial, ad agency to like talking about mental health?
Yeah.
Right. Because the gap for them is so big. They don't see how you could be in both places.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the journey, right? It's the pathways that happen in between, and the messy stuff, and trying to make sense of that and go, I had a choice. I could keep silent about my struggles, or I could seek help and get to a point where I could actually talk about it. And through talking about it, I know that I'm helping further process for myself, but then I'm also helping, again, other people. And I know that the times when I have felt lowest, I have needed to feel seen and heard. I have needed some people around me to help give context to what I was experiencing. And so thinking again, man, I was so thankful for maybe a podcast I came across, or maybe a book I read, or maybe a song or a piece of art, or whatever that was, a conversation with a friend over coffee. Like, all those moments added up were things that were helpful and healing. And I'm like, when you realize that someone's willing to share their pain through some of those things, then it's also an invitation for you to say, how can I move through mine in such a way where I get healing? And then again, offer it as more of the conversation for the people around me, more of a healing agent.
Yeah. I like the idea of serving, right? That there can be a phoenix that rises from the ashes.
Yes.
Idea, right? That there's that you went through all this pain and darkness and, despair, and that it's not for naught. And I think that's part of that self-awareness part that you were talking about.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's like, you come up for air and you realize like, oh, you've gone through all of this. You went through the depths of Mordor, right? Yeah. And you've come back to the Shire, and you now can share like your experiences for those that may never take that journey, or those that might be on a more philosophical journey or internal journey. And so I love this idea of revisiting it, and when you have processed it, and you can then bring it to light, whether you said like one-on-one or in a book or a song, it's kind of like a really beautiful thing. It is like the butterfly that comes out of the cocoon.
Yes.
To come back to your book.
Yes. And the butterfly's right there on the cover. Yeah. Giving the little wink to what's to come. Yeah.
So Mike, remind people where they can find all of your great stuff that you do. Where can they find these incredible books that you've written? Yes. And give a shout out for, I know you're talking on a stage coming up in a few months in Nashville. So be sure to let us know where we can find out more about that.
Yes. So in terms of the books, probably the easiest place for people to go is just Amazon. And if you type in my name and Blue, Story of Letting Go, that book will come up. And then also there's the author page that has links to my other books. Like I said, I have 8 altogether. So you can find those there. That's, they'll take care of the printing on demand, shipping, and also doing the international stuff. So, I don't have to worry about any of that legwork. If you are in the United States and you'd like a signed copy, you can find that on my website as well, which is mikebrennan.me. There's a tab there for books as well as my artwork. And on there, on that main site of mine, mikebrennan.me, you'll find live event sketching. You'll find the Daily Creative Habit resources and community that I talked about, some of the speaking things. That's really the hub for all the things that I do. And in terms of the speaking event that's coming up, it's a mental health marketing event in Franklin, Tennessee, and it's October, I believe, 7th and 8th. I'll be speaking about using creativity for a way to process through for mental health. And so sharing some of the things I shared today and just also being able to share some visuals on what that has looked like. So I'm excited about that opportunity and offering it to those who are there who are professionals in the mental health industry as well, counselors and therapists and so on and so forth. Yeah.
I love that your creativity and your journey gets to cross over into the mental health, professional side. I think is so, so cool. I love when I hear other creative friends who get to enter the thick of an industry that you're kind of peripheral to. And you get to bring your expertise in there and show how this practice has helped you. To be a fly on, I would love to be in that audience to just kind of hear the awakening or the ideas and the ahas that people take from what you're going to present on stage. I think is going to be really amazing. They're going to walk out with a sack of golden nuggets. So it's going to be really good. Mike, this has been so fun. And
yes,
I am excited for people to check out your work and check out all of the things that you're doing and stay up to date, and especially check out that super duper collage on your Instagram. To make it really easy for everybody, all the links will be in the show notes. So if you can't remember what Mike said, you'll just hop down to the show notes, click the link. It will take you right over there to find out about his book and his Instagram and all his beautiful artwork. And I can't wait to one day meet in person and do a daily sketch practice at Starbucks with you. It'd be really, really fun.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Shelley. This has been amazing.
Oh my gosh. It's all the pleasures on this side of the camera. Let me tell you, this has been so great. I need to put the fire out for now, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. Come hang out with us on Instagram at creativecamp.pro. Drop your questions, share your thoughts, and tag us in your stories. The more people we gather around the fire, the better the conversation gets. If you'd like to support the show, you can buy us a coffee and sign up for our newsletter. Links are in the show notes below. We'll stoke the fire again real soon, but until then, keep creating, keep connecting, and I'll see you next time around the campfire.